So today we're here with Miss Eulanie Lashley. I'm having to sound sophisticated.
I like it.
Yes. President and CEO of Texas Health here in Mansfield, Texas Health Hospital. And the purpose of what we're doing is to kind of learn your journey. How did you get to where you are? And of course, we want to learn something from you. So I want to start real easy question, get you primed for this. Where were you born and raised?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Being new to the city, it's been a real blessing to be able to meet with so many of you this morning. Really looking forward to getting to know many of you better. I was born on the Caribbean island of St. Vincent in a tiny town, capital of the island, Kingstown, St. Vincent. And my family and I, we lived there for about 9 years. I have a relatively large family. My parents had 8 children, 7 of us survived. I am number 6 of the living children from my parents. And so when I came along, most of my older siblings were already almost graduating high school. So in 1993, I was 9 years old. My parents decided that they wanted to transition to another place to make a better life for us. And so we moved from St. Vincent to Antigua. And Antigua is where I grew up. That's where I graduated high school. That's where I got my first job. That's where most of my life is. And that's where my parents and a lot of my family members remain today.
So from your time growing up in the Caribbean, what sticks with you today? I mean, what was it about that you bring with you that is your foundation?
Really, a lot of that goes back to my parents, right? So like I mentioned, my parents had a relatively large family. And as I was telling the team yesterday, my dad didn't graduate elementary school. He had 13, 14 siblings of his own.
Wow.
And so when he was really young, his parents pulled him out of school, sent him to learn a trade, and he went into construction. And so that was all that he knew. My mother had a similar story. She did finish elementary school, but she never got to complete high school as a youngster. She ended up dropping out of school as well for a lot of reasons, which is more her story to tell. But she and my dad came together and created this family on that foundation where there was no formal education, and they had to figure out how to make ends meet to take care of these kids. So there were a lot of moments in my life growing up that there was this sense of vulnerability, right? So, you deal with the insecurity of food, you deal with the insecurity of having some place to live. But in the midst of all of that, my parents were still very faithful, very God-fearing people. And so that taught us really early that in order for us to be successful, whether we had a little bit or whether we had a lot, that foundation of faith had to be something that we rested on for as long as we lived. I mentioned to the team yesterday, there was nothing that my mother wouldn't pray over. Like if a thread was missing from her dress, like she would pray over it. There were many nights that you wake up the next day and find your forehead greasy because she had spent all night at our bedside praying over and anointing all 7 of our children. So that foundation of faith was incredibly strong for us, and it made it more bearable, I would say, when you were facing things like having to walk to school knowing that you had no food. The other thing I'd say is growing up in that type of environment, it does make you self-sufficient to a point, but it helps you value the strength that there is in community. We learned really early as a family of 7 that we were there to support each other. And without each other, we could not get too far. My next oldest sibling is about maybe 6 or 7 years older than I am. And so I learned really early that you're gonna have to depend on your older siblings, and it's your responsibility, for me as number 6, to take care of number 7. So there was this sense of community and togetherness and unity that my parents really cultivated in us as we were growing up. And then the last thing I would say is that for them coming up without what we would consider a formal education, it became very important for their children to be better than they were. So my dad had a mantra. He would say to me, Samantha, My middle name is Samantha. I didn't know my name.
I was like, wait a
Eulanie.
minute.
I'll just tell you, I didn't know my name was Eulanie until I started school. So they would call me by my middle name. He would say, Samantha, I just need you all to go to school and get an education. That's it. Go to school and get an education. So we learned really early that despite what we were going through, education, at least in my parents' eyes, was going to be our ticket. So they made sure that we learned to read early, that we had everything that we needed to be able to go to school, because their goal was ultimately to make sure that we had a life that was better than the life that they had, and we could provide for our own families and for the communities that we'd find ourselves in, different from how they could contribute. So those would be the things that I've always held on to. I don't know if you know much about Caribbean people, but we love to have a good time, but we're also pretty hardworking. My parents had a really solid work ethic. And we're really big believers in education and continuous learning and growing. So I think those are all things that I've taken with me over the course of my life.
Okay.
And to be honest, there are things that I'm try my best to impress upon my own children. And certainly those are things that have influenced my own leadership over the last 17 or so years that I've been in healthcare.
Okay. So tell me about the transition from there to the U.S. And where did you go?
So when I graduated high school, I actually went back to our local college on the island and I became a teacher. So I was a teacher there for 2 years. And it was the most incredible 2 years of my life. I learned a lot about myself. But again, you can see that passion for education and continuous growth and learning showing up. It was one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do with my life. There was a lady in my church who had been a teacher in the school system in Antigua for a really long time. And one day after church, she came to me and she said, you are really smart and you have a lot of potential and you have too much potential to be here. And I remember thinking, lady, first of all, thank you, this is awkward. Second of all, I hear you say education, but I'm understanding money, which I have none of. Like now I'm at the point where I can work and I can help to take care of my parents and my family. We don't have the money for me to go to school. And she said, well, funny story, because I actually did this thing. And I was like, tell me more. She said, well, I heard about this scholarship competition that a group is putting on the island, and I actually signed you up for this scholarship competition. And I remember looking at her thinking, are you kidding me? And she said, no, I signed you up because you should not be here. You deserve an opportunity to go away and to study and to learn and to just do more. And sure enough, she really had signed me up for this scholarship competition. And being the West Indian child that I am, all I said to her was, okay, I guess I will do that. But in my head, I was thinking, there is no way this is going to work. First of all, this competition that you entered me in involves math. It's not going to happen. I will do it because that is who I am. I'm going to respect you. Thank you so much for believing in me. I appreciate it, but I don't think this is going to work. Fast forward a couple of months, and they selected the girl with the top scores of all the children who took these exams and a boy with the top scores of all the children who took these exams. And those two people had to go head to head in like a competition. And so when they called and said, hey, you are a top girl, I was like, I'm sorry, what did you say? And they said, no, you're the top girl. You have the highest scores on the island. And I was like, but what, the math scores too? And they said, yeah, it's you. And so we participated in this competition, and I bested that young man in our final contest, and I was awarded what was at the time a full scholarship to come to Atlantic Union College, which is a small Christian school in South Lancaster, Massachusetts. I was pretty excited. It was incredible because it was nice to have somebody see something in me that I was really fuzzy about myself. Mm-hmm. It was nice for her to have made that investment. And so I was really grateful for that. And I was grateful that I now had a way to go off and get my education without having my parents saddled with the burden of trying to figure out how we were going to pay for it. Student loans were not a thing. It was not a thing. And so I went ahead and I quit my job. I let my boss know that I wasn't going to be there. And about 2 weeks or so before I was scheduled to come to take my full scholarship, I got a call that there were some administrative changes at the school and that my scholarship had been revoked.
Wow.
Yeah, and that felt like a ton of bricks just crashing down. Like if you think about moments where you really think God showed up and created a path for you, and then to have something completely opposite of what you were thinking happen, like that was my moment. So I had to now deal with all of the anger and the hurt that comes along with that, but also dealing with the folks who were expecting me not to be there anymore, and then suddenly I'm here all the time. I was fortunate enough to be able to get my job back, so I taught for another year, and during that time, the organization that had granted me the scholarship, they were negotiating back and forth with the school, and what they settled on was that I would now have a partial scholarship to go to Atlantic Union College. So that was $8,000 worth of tuition on a $16,000 was the total cost at the time. We had no money. In my head, I'm like, I don't think I can make this happen. Where am I gonna get $8,000 from? Like, I don't have it. The math is literally not mathing. It doesn't work. My parents, though, remember I told you how my mother would pray over everything and my father was right there alongside her. They spent so much time praying and encouraging. They were like, we know it's not perfect, we know it's not ideal, but we believe God has a plan. We're gonna figure out how to get you there. The money will come, we just need you to get there. And so I said, okay, I went through it again. I quit my job again for the second time. The principal was like, do not come back. I was like, noted, I will not be back. But I quit my job, and my parents spent some time literally borrowing money as they could from their friends to be able to afford my plane ticket. And the day before I was supposed to travel was the day that I remember my parents finally having enough and giving me the money and me racing to get to the ticket counter in time to buy the ticket to leave the next day to come to the States. And when I left, they put $400 in my hand, which was all the money that they had at the time. Put $400 in my hand, and they prayed over me, and they said, you go, and God will take care of you. And I think it was perhaps the
Gives me goosebumps.
Yeah. It was the biggest test of my own faith that I have ever experienced, coming to a foreign country, knowing nobody, coming in August. The weather is different. I know that it's gonna snow. I know it's gonna get cold. I have no money to buy cold weather clothes. I have shorts and I have flip-flops. That's all I have. And having to go through that experience and multiple others, but just watching God deliver moment after moment after moment, always at just the right time, opening the right doors. It really has been a journey of really just faith and gratitude for me over the course of the last 17 years to have made it from that tiny island in those circumstances to this place.
So you get to Massachusetts.
So I get to Massachusetts.
So tell me about the difference that you saw. What was that like?
I mean, I spent so many.
Besides the weather, you know, I mean,
but
yeah.
In the early days, honestly, it was just so much awe for me because the closest I had been to the United States or honestly any other foreign country was my TV screen. So there were a lot of times that I would just drive around or walk around looking at people's lawn. I know it sounds crazy, but I would look at the lawn and I was like, wow, it's just like it is on TV. It's like TV grass. So it was the simplest things that were different. I had to get used to repeating myself very often because in my normal thick Antiguan accent, people would have a hard time understanding me, and I had to figure out how to be able to communicate more effectively in a way that people would understand. It was simple things from, how do you address people in the street? Calling somebody by their first name who was older than me, I can't do it. Even now I think about relationships I have with physicians like Dr. Ford, and in my head I'm like, we work together, we are peers, but he will always be Dr. Ford for me. I cannot call him by his first name because that's a level of respect that we grew up with there. So a lot of those, just a lot of the things that you wouldn't think would cause a pause, it really was just different. The educational system was different. And moving into college here, it was just a very different experience for me as well.
Okay. So, what I think is interesting, because I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell me how you got into healthcare.
So, to be honest, there was a point in my life where I thought I was going to be a neurosurgeon. I, like almost every Seventh-day Adventist kid during the time I was growing up, read this book by Ben Carson, Gifted Hands, that talked about how he had, a really spicy temper, and his mom was intent on him learning to read, and he became this neurosurgeon. For a long time, I thought I, too, certainly would be like Ben Carson and become a neurosurgeon. A few years later, I realized that I don't really like blood. And that I had a particular problem experiencing other people's blood. And so that kind of turned me away from that. But what I thought I knew instead was that I had a passion for justice, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. So that was my goal. It's like, okay, I can't be a doctor. I won't be a doctor. I'll be a lawyer. When I came to Atlantic Union College, there was no law degree, no law program at that school. And so I opted for the next best thing. I started taking classes for accounting. And so I went into business school. While in business school, I found out about this organization called Adventist Health Systems. And they had come to the school recruiting for their summer internship program. And they talked about this company that I just thought was fascinating. Like, your mission is extending the healing ministry of Christ. How does that not resonate on a deeply personal, almost like an atomic level for me? It's what I was where I was at Atlantic Union College at that time because I felt like Christ's ministry was extended to me. I was there because of a praying mother, and to be able to spend the rest of my life really working on a platform that lets me live out something that is so core to my being, it was just very appealing for me. And so I entered the program at that time. I learned a lot more about the organization. I did not get selected for the internship then. That was fine because I was only a sophomore. I still had time. I still had my junior year and my senior year to really get into the program. So fast forward a couple of years, I ended up transitioning from Atlantic Union College over to Andrews University, where I would later finish my degree. And Adventist Health Systems, they came around again. And now I'm a junior. My grades are great because I've been working hard. And I feel like at this point, they're going to come for the interviews. I'm going to do a really job, and certainly I'm going to get selected this time. And I did not get selected in the initial interview. So now there's this healthcare company that I never knew about that really seems to speak to me and who I am as a person, and they won't take me. And I was so sad. I was like, Lord, how much rejection are you going to have me experience? It was about 2 weeks or so before this internship program was supposed to start in the summer of 2007. I got a call from the lady who had interviewed me during the first round of interviews. Her name was Corey Grodak, and she was the director of accounting at what was then Florida Hospital Orlando, no, Advent Health Orlando. And she said, hey, I know that you didn't get selected for the internship, but we just had somebody drop out of the program. Oh, they did? Oh, I'm that's so sorry. I just had somebody drop out of the program, and you were the next person on the list. Would you like the spot? Would I like the spot? Yes, I think I will be taking that spot. I would love that. She was like, well, do you have a car? Because you're probably going to need to drive to the location when you get there. I said, I do not have a car, but I have will. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. Hung up the phone with her, and now I'm super excited, right? Because this is my dream job in a space that I feel good about being in and living my life in healthcare with this particular organization. But I am still an international student. And a part of the rules of being an international student is that you cannot work more than 20 hours a week. You face getting your visa report revoked, getting deported, all of that. You can't work more than 20 hours a week. You can only do it if you're on an internship, and that internship has to be taken as a class. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I'm just gonna go tell them, hey, I got this opportunity to go get this internship, and they are going to let me register for the class, and then I'll pay for the class when I get back from the internship with all of the money that I would have earned. See how that makes sense in my mind? Because certainly they're gonna be invested in me going on the internship, and that's the only way I'm gonna make enough money to cover the class. So that was the speech that I gave to the International Student Services office. What do you think they said? They said, there, little international student, that is a really great plan. That's not how any of this works. In order for you to take the class, you must pay for the class. And I said, right, but I'm gonna go do the job so I can pay for the class later. And they said, that's not how this works. So again, coming off of this high where it's like the impossible is now possible, but wait, it feels impossible again. And I went to go see my advisor, Dr. Ann Gibson. I went to go see her and I said, Dr. Gibson, I'm like full on in tears. I am crying because like this is my opportunity. This is an organization I think I could really fall in love with. And I go into her office and I said, Dr. Gibson, I got the internship. I know we celebrated that together. Here's the newest development. And she's like, what do you mean they won't let you register for the class? I was like, they won't, I have to pay for the class first to register to go off to make money. And she was like, right, but you're making the money so you can pay for the, I'm like, yes, Dr. Gibson, you and I are on the same page, but that's not how it works. She picks up the phone and she calls over to the Dean of International Student Services. And she's like, hey, why did you tell this girl that she can't take, she needs to go get the internship so she can make the money to pay for the class and to pay for school? And they're like, yeah, we're sorry, we can't do it. Like, it's the law, like we can't do anything about it. And she sits down there with me for a while, and now we're both kind of misty-eyed and crying. And she looks over at me and she says, stand up. And so I get up and she grabs her purse and she says, follow me. I'm like, okay, where we are marching to Zion. And she literally marches me across the promenade of the school into the big administration building. And in my head, I'm like, where are we going? Also, you are walking really fast. And she takes me downstairs to registration, and we stand in line. And I'm like, why are we standing in line? Why are we here? Like, what are we doing? She gets up to the register, and the young lady says to her, yes, how may I help you? And she says, I need to register her for a class. And I'm standing behind her like, me? Am I her? And she says, come up here. Tell them what the class number is. I give them the class number. And they say to her, that's going to be $2,354.27. And she puts her hand in her purse and she pulls out her debit card and she gives it to them. And she pays for my internship. And a few days later, I am able to get on a plane, go to Orlando, do my orientation, and then travel to Kansas City to do my internship for the summer at Shawnee Mission Medical Center under a controller at the time whose name was Penny Johnson. And so I spent my summer there. When I got done with the internship, I went back to school. I was hopeful that I'd made a good impression, but you never really know how these things are gonna go. In February of 2008, I got a call from what is now Advent Health Orlando, the financial planning department, a gentleman named Richard Brennan. He's like, hey, Eulanie, I wanted to talk to you about like what you've been doing at school, and I know you're gonna be graduating soon. Just tell me a little bit about yourself. We talked for a while, and at the end of it, he said, how would you like to come to Florida for an interview? It's like, Florida is hot. There is no snow. This is perfect. It's close to family. This is going to be excellent. So I tell him, absolutely, yes, I will be there. I will move everything around to be there. I go to Orlando, interview for the job, and I am successful. And he says, we're going to hire you as an analyst in our financial planning department starting September of 2008. So I got married, I graduated from college with my bachelor's in accounting. I graduated on August 3rd, 2008. I got married on August 10, 2008. And I started at Advent Health Orlando on September 8th, 2008. And I've been with the organization ever since, literally starting from a summer internship to the work that I get to do now as CEO at Texas Health Mansfield.
So with all of that said, how does that life impact your leadership?
It's hard to see a way that it doesn't, right? Growing up in like what I would consider a vulnerable space, it makes you very aware of sometimes the things that are going on around you, and it makes you more sensitive to the needs of the people that you get to work with every day, and it makes you sensitive to the needs of your patients. So I have learned that sometimes what you see demonstrated in behavior is not always because somebody is ill-intentioned or has just some ill will. Sometimes there are things happening under the surface that you can't quite see. So I've spent a lot of time over the course of my career really trying to get to know people and to understand who they are, and to understand them outside of a work context too, because a lot of the things that we end up bringing to work with us have nothing to do with what's happening in the office. So I've made it my mission to be personally invested in the people that I get to lead. I love knowing people's names, but I want to know about your family too. I want to know how you're spending your time outside of work, because especially in this role, and honestly, every leadership role that I've been fortunate to take on, I believe that it's my responsibility as the leader to take care of the team. If I take care of my team will take care of their team, and eventually they'll take care of the patients. So I always try to approach it with a certain amount of grace, that everybody really just wants to do their best. And everybody can do better with the appropriate coaching and the appropriate mentorship and the appropriate education. So I've always made that a mission to make sure that I'm providing those opportunities for the teams that I've been fortunate enough to get to lead. The other thing I would say is that you learn just the value of continuous learning. One of the things that surprised probably a lot of people when I started really moving up in the ranks is that I dress like this most days, or I have on a suit most days, but you'll just as easily find me in a pair of sneakers and some scrubs with my hair pulled back, disguised in the OR. I love working alongside the teams because it gives me an appreciation for the work and the experiences that they have on a daily basis, and it helps me make better decisions. I remember when I first became a chief operating officer, we were going into our Memorial Day weekend, and the water heater, our boiler broke. Brand new building. We were like 5 years old at the time, new boiler, but the boiler broke, and that meant that we were having issues keeping the building cool. And it took nights of working for the guys, but they would always be surprised if you're out here at midnight, I'm gonna come over and check on you at midnight. Do you need something to eat? That's fine, I'm gonna go get it. I'm not always gonna be walking around in my heels. It made me understand, I guess growing up the way I did made me understand what it truly means and how important it is to speak value and communicate value and respect for your team regardless of what role they're playing. I would be just as easily out there with our housekeeper who's cleaning rooms in EVS, in scrubs, cleaning a bed. Teach me how you clean this. Oh, is this the Paracet? Is that what it does to your fingernails? All of that really helps me make better decisions. But the side bonus for me is that it also now gives me a different appreciation from what they're doing, but a different knowledge base
you're learning.
that I get to draw on that helps inform the decisions that we collectively make as an executive team as well. So we're not making decisions in isolation of what reality is. You really have some good information that you're taking in as you make some of the difficult decisions that we face every day.
So I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions. I'm going to open it up for everyone else to ask you questions. What do you see future-wise in regards to healthcare?
I think that is the one question that every healthcare administrator probably wishes that they had a crystal ball to really look into the future. I think that there are a lot of pressures that you hear about. We know that the cost at a lot of healthcare facilities, it's a lot of cost, from supplies to compensation to all of those things are things that we're going to have to face, especially with the increasing pressure on reimbursements and how we're going to get paid for our services. That's something that I think Advent Health and Texas Health Resources have been navigating for the last few years, and really trying to find ways to make sure that we're as sustainable as we can be. The other thing that is going to continue to be a challenge for us is just the number of providers entering the workforce. I know when we talk about certain specialties, having people aren't as apt, and you guys can probably testify to it as well in your work, but people aren't as apt as, we're not finding folks going into healthcare and going into nursing and becoming physicians at the rate at which they were historically. The profession has changed quite a bit. I think the pandemic has really shifted the way that people think about healthcare, and that dynamic of really being the ones on the forefront when your health, when there's a national health crisis or any health crisis. I think it's really taken a toll on folks in a way that maybe we didn't anticipate at the time going through the pandemic. And so having that workforce be stable long-term to continue to care for the populations that we serve, I think is gonna be a challenge. And so many of our healthcare facilities now are trying to understand, how might we partner differently with nursing schools? How might we partner differently with medical schools in order to make sure that we continue to keep the pipeline of people that we're going to need to ensure that healthcare, as we know it right now, persists into the future. I do think there's also a certain level of concierge space that's emerging in healthcare, where we have to figure out how to be better at getting services to the consumer more quickly, more easily, and in a space that's convenient for them. I know some of the things that we've tried before include like dispatch health and having home health care providers that are actively going in and doing things like pediatricians visits. What about our elderly populations? Are there ways that they need their health care provided differently from what we've always seen? A 15-minute conversation with my older parents probably is not going to be enough. They need a physician who's going to invest differently. So how do we solve for those types of problems to make sure that healthcare truly is meeting the needs of all of the people that we get to serve every single day? I think those are a couple of the nuances that we'll work through. The models are going to continue to change. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we don't need hospitals or we don't need the services that are provided within our facilities. It's just we all have to become a little bit more intentional on how we deliver care. I will say that it's one of the reasons that I'm incredibly proud of the work that we do at Texas Health Mansfield, and honestly within Advent Health as a whole. There is a difference that I feel that is tangible and that is experienced by people who get to experience healthcare in our facilities. I think there's a holistic nature that we try to bring to healthcare, so that we're not just taking care of what physically ails you, but we're paying attention. We're using empathy as a tool to understand what's happening with you mentally, what's happening with you emotionally, and connecting the pieces that we need to as well to make sure that you are well taken care of as a person, holistically and completely, when you come through the doors as well. The other thing that I would say that I'm really grateful that maybe there's more emphasis on it now is mental health, especially mental health as it relates to providers and provider fatigue and our frontline caregivers. I will tell you, having gone through the most recent crisis that we had with the pandemic, just watching the toll that it took on some of our nurses, watching the toll that it took on some of our physicians. One of the things that we talked about often as an organization was that the toll on our mental health, the toll that living through that period in history will take on us, some of the effects that we don't even understand the fullness of what is going to come with us. So even as we're used to thinking of healthcare being What bones can I fix? What organs can I repair? There is a significant mental health component that we as healthcare providers are going to have to engage in that space differently from how we've been engaging in the past as well.
Okay, last question, then we're going to open it up. What would be your best piece of advice for someone?
I'm gonna say this because it's probably I've had to be in new roles pretty often, right? And one of the things that we do, or one of the things that you hear a lot when you're going into a new role or you're making a transition, especially when the person that came before you was amazing, you hear it very often. You hear, "You have really big shoes to fill. You have really big shoes to fill." And that is a compliment for certain to the persons who would have preceded you. But there is a space where I know for me, when I was very early in my career, that would really, there's a significant amount of anxiety that produced to make sure that I was doing it right. The one thing that somebody said to me that I have cherished forever, it was a mentor of mine, his name was Jeff Hurst. And I remember when I made my first significant leadership jump, I was sitting with him and I was like, "Oh, they said Tiffany's amazing and she did such a great job and she's so smart and I respect her so much and she did all these things. And let me tell you all of her accolades. There's no way I'm going to be able to fill her shoes." And he listened to me for about a good 5 minutes, just run down her resume and all the reasons why she was amazing. And he said to me, "Why are you so concerned about filling her shoes? She took her shoes with her."
That's right.
Bring your own shoes. There is space for you even when you are new to maybe do things a little bit differently, but for it still to be effective and for it still to be authentic. We all get caught up in this space where sometimes we're overachievers and we want to do the best possible job and we want to do all of the right things, but we get so caught up in trying on somebody else's shoes or doing it the way that somebody else did it. We miss the opportunity to be authentic to who we really are and to bring the talents that really got us to that space, bring those to bear on the new opportunity that you face. So to any person who is new, it's okay, it's perfectly fine to be new. Spend less time worrying about how you're going to fill somebody else's shoes and make sure you understand what is it that makes you special and what is it that you are going to contribute to the space. Bring your own shoes. The other person's shoes literally will not fit you. They most often will not fit. So focus on the authentic connections that you get to make and the authentic skills that you bring to bear on the different teams that you get to lead and the teams that you get to support and serve.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions.
So y'all, you just moved to Texas.
Yeah.
How do you think about Texas and the Mansfield area? How's that transition for you?
You know, to be honest, I really like it here. You guys can probably tell, I've been as close to Texas as my TV screen. And so a lot of what I knew was from what I could see on TV. And I've been so grateful to have been here. Everybody keeps warning me about the heat. The weather is a little different from what I'm used to, but I found an incredibly warm community. I found a community that's fast growing. You know, folks are focused on their mission. Everybody really is working together to ensure that what we've been entrusted with as a city of Mansfield, that we respect the history that we have coming forward, but really figure out how to continue to grow in a way that preserves that, but adds new faces and new spaces, new businesses to the community as well. And I found that incredibly refreshing. I tell them, the team often, my first Sunday here, I had to go to the grocery store to pick up a couple of things from Walmart, and I was playing with a mirror, and a gentleman and his wife were shopping behind me, and they just stopped and started talking to me in the aisle of Walmart. And I was like, where have I arrived? Like, I love Florida. If any Floridians are listening, I love you. But in Florida, it's like you keep your head down, you get in, you get out. Don't fraternize too much. That's not what we're here for. But people have just been incredibly warm and willing to just share pieces of themselves and their hearts. And I really, really love that. My family just arrived on Sunday. I've been here since March. The end of March, beginning of April. My family just got here on Sunday, and so I'm excited for us to explore the city and explore the state together. And it's nice that people are so warm and accommodating as well.
Question. You mentioned about the recruitment, the enrollment, and after pandemic, it kind of changed a little bit to healthcare. And I feel like I'm living that firsthand as well. I'm the Dean for School of Nursing at TTU, Tennessee School of Nursing in Lubbock. So my question is about how would you see the collaboration between academia and the healthcare system?
I can tell you from just the experience that I lived prior to coming out here to Texas that it has to be tighter now than it has been in the past. One of the things that we experienced, which I think was pretty common, and I'm going to talk about the Orlando market because that's where I was when we were going through the experience. I mean, we were losing clinicians, folks who just decided that they didn't want to be in the space, they didn't want to put their lives at risk, folks who knew their kids were going to be out of school now and things were going to look different, folks who had elderly parents that they wanted to take care of, and people who were just like, well, I was close to retirement anyway, now I'm going to go retire. And so we lost a significant portion of our workforce, much like every other healthcare facility after that. One of the things that we did pretty intentionally in the Orlando market and really in different pockets across the organization was that we really turned our focus to our local nursing schools and our local medical schools. And we created everything from scholarships. We opened more spots on our campuses for graduate nurses. We created dedicated education units where students could come in and live as a nurse day by day. We made sure that we had appropriate preceptors for them to go through their programs, and we made space available for them. When they come through our dedicated education units, they knew that, hey, when you get done, these are the campuses that you have to choose from. Here are the roles that you're going to go into. We also got into things like high schools and elementary schools earlier than we had been getting into in the beginning, and making sure that those kids, even from that young age, understood that healthcare was really a path for you. And it wasn't ideal or unique to nursing or to being a physician. We also needed x-ray techs. We needed people to work in the imaging spaces as well. So really making sure that folks understood that healthcare really had a plethora of opportunities, and providing more exposure to our facilities and what was possible than we had been before. I think prior to the pandemic, a lot of healthcare organizations perhaps took it for granted that people understood the fullness of what was happening within the walls of the hospital. And after that, we had to become more intentional about how we shared the opportunities that were available. So when we talk about the partnership between academia and our healthcare facilities, I feel like that has to be stronger now than it has ever been before. The other thing I'd say is that even if you think about the types of research that's being done in some of our academic facilities, sometimes that gets a little siloed away from a direct impact to healthcare. That's another benefit that you get by taking some of those walls down. You're able to have a window into, okay, what are best practices here? How might we influence healthcare in this space? What are opportunities for us to partner from a research perspective to ensure that our patients are getting the best care that they possibly can? So those relationships, in my opinion, I'd say honestly across our organization, probably those relationships are stronger, probably more meaningful now than they ever had been prior to the pandemic.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I have a question. Well, I appreciate a great hospital. Do you think there's some opportunities for the hospital to partner with the city and maybe other organizations in the city to try to make our community healthier so that there's less need to go to the hospital?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. Honestly, there is no way for us really to talk about wholeness or extending the healing ministry of Christ without taking some of that into account. I know that from a partnership standpoint, one of the reasons why I'm so proud of the facility of Texas Health Mansfield is that there is so much investment in the community. I know we're participating in food drives, and we're making sure that we're going out now as a part of our community health plan and being available to do vaccines and partnering with the YMCA and making sure that we're providing the appropriate care for their population as well. So I honestly believe that there is a space, there has to be a space in healthcare for us to do that. There has to be a space for us to continue to promote wellness outside the walls of the facility. I think, like I said, I don't think the need for hospitals will ever go away. But our goal really as a healthcare provider in the community is to ensure that we are really there for you when you need us. But we really want you to not need us for as long as you possibly can. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I got to spend a Saturday morning with my team out at Breezy Oaks. Is that Breezy Oaks with the team? And they were out there with the community. We were playing games with the kids who came to see us, and it really was a social event, but it also allowed us to do blood pressure checks and to say, you know, have you been to see the doctor lately? Your blood pressure is a little bit elevated. Here's a card with all of your information. Take this to your next appointment. Oh, by the way, if you need somebody to help you find a physician, we have somebody here who can do that before it becomes a critical space where you need a hospital. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity, and it really behooves us as healthcare professionals to figure out how we make the appropriate connections and how we partner with the existing organizations in the community to make sure that we're delivering healthcare outside the walls of the hospital as well.
I have a question.
I knew there'd be one.
How many employees does Texas Health Mansfield have?
I'm gonna lean on Renee, my HR director in the back. I wanna say it's about 250, Renee, but tell me whether I'm close. You said 325?
325,
325, including PRN.
Do y'all know approximately how many patients y'all see annually?
Annually, we see about 15,000 through the emergency department. In terms of admissions, close to 3,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But all of that being said, we do have significant space and capacity to continue to grow to meet the need. I know that those numbers, when you hear them, are really, they're really big. 15,000 people is a lot of people. But we do have capacity to continue to care for the community, not just right now, but well into the future as well.
Okay, last chance. There you go.
Interested to hear, technology is booming right now, and especially in the healthcare world, and how it's being developed and interpreted to accentuate the services that we can provide in healthcare. So I'm interested always to hear different people's opinions. So what's yours? What do you think about the new technologies and how it can both benefit, and what type of risks you see with it in the delivery of healthcare, especially within the hospital?
Yeah, I think I saw a quote somewhere this week. I don't remember what I was watching or reading or where I was, but it said something to the effect of AI is not going to replace nurses and doctors. Nurses and doctors will be replaced by
Those that use
those
it.
who actually use it.
That's right.
I think that's kind of where we are. I don't think that we are at much of a risk where the new technologies do harm to patients. I think we'll just get more, we'll get more savvy at incorporating it into our practice. I know within the organization there are a couple of things that we're working on that will enhance the way that we document, that will enhance the way that we care for patients in the physician spaces and in the hospital as well. So for us, we are embracing all of the possibility that comes along with AI. We have a pretty skilled team, honestly, on both sides of our joint venture relationship. from an IT perspective that's vetting a lot of that stuff and making sure that the spaces where we are using new technologies, that there's no risk to patient data or patient safety or anything like that. And some of the trials that we've gone through have demonstrated very early that they're very effective results. The thing that makes that really important to me is that that really can be used as a tool to reduce the burden on some of our physician partners and our nurses as well, especially when it comes to documentation and making sure that we get timely results back to patients and back to physicians so that they have what they need to make informed decisions as well. So I feel it might be a little Pollyanna-ish right now, and I'll admit that, but I do feel like there's more benefit to us in figuring out how we utilize those technologies for the betterment of patient care than it is to back away from it and be too afraid of it. And I've been very grateful that the organization really has been leaning heavily into the space to understand how we can apply it to better serve our patients. Dr. Ford, is there anything that you would add from your perspective on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, you've been in a doctor's office or a hospital, you probably see that nursing and physicians spend a significant amount of time in front of the computer screen, clicking the mouse button, typing on the keyboard. And you realize that the best place for a nurse or doctor is actually in front of the patient, talking to them, spending time. So I think AI help us do just that, reducing those clerical tasks so that the doctor, the nurse, or clinician can really spend more time with the patient, less time with the computer.
Yeah.
It's been many years, but the last time I saw data about the amount of time spent in documentation, it was about 50% of the healthcare provider's time is spent documenting.
Yeah. And when you think, that's a huge amount of time when you come in for a visit. It's hard then for a provider to be able to get quality time, even understanding what's happening when so much of their time has been spent documenting. For us here at Advent Health over the last year or two, Dr. Ford, we've been working through the implementation of our new EHR electronic medical record. And so even that, as we navigate Epic and we're figuring out ways to optimize it so that we can make sure that our physicians and our nurses are spending time where it needs to be. Dr. Ford said it right, eyeball to eyeball, face to face with a patient, as opposed to patient, computer screen, provider somewhere behind that looking around. So yeah.
All right, it is time up. So she's going to hang out. If you want to visit with her, she's available for a little bit, she said. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I
What
appreciate
a
it.
great story you've got.
I am grateful.
Yeah.
Very grateful.
It's awesome.
Thank
awesome.
you.
All right. Glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.